One night, a young person and their friend, feeling bored, decided to go for a walk. It was around 10 p.m., and the air was calm as they strolled through the quiet night. As they walked, they suddenly heard a bird whistling in the distance. Being an animal lover, the young person instinctively whistled back, thinking it was just a harmless bird. To their surprise, the bird whistled back, and this back and forth continued for about 20 minutes. At first, they thought it was cool, a kind of playful interaction with nature. But as the whistling went on, both friends began to feel uneasy. Something about it just didn't feel right, so they decided to stop responding and head back to the friend's house. As they walked back, trying to shake off the strange encounter, they heard something moving in the trees beside them. The sound was unmistakable. The crunch of footsteps in the underbrush. At first, it seemed like whatever it was had 4 legs, which made them think it might just be an animal. But then, the footsteps changed. Suddenly, it sounded like the creature was walking on 2 legs. Panic set in, and they picked up their pace, trying to get back to the house as quickly as possible. But whatever was following them did the same, its footsteps matching their speed. The most terrifying part was that it continued to whistle the same eerie tune from earlier, as if it were playing a sinister game. They made it back to the house safely, but the experience left them deeply shaken. Even after that night, the whistling didn't leave them. They could still hear it from time to time, repeating the same unsettling melody. They never saw what was making the sound, and they never wanted to. From that moment on, they refused to engage with it, knowing whatever it was far from natural and utterly terrifying. When Alice was 16, coming home late one night from her hostess job, a young woman had an experience she would never forget. It was around midnight, and she was driving through a wooded area in East Tennessee, heading up a hill. As she reached the top, she slowed down, chatting with her boyfriend on the phone, when something caught her eye. A deer standing at the edge of the road. She stopped her car, waiting for the deer to cross. But instead of moving across the road, the deer did something impossible. The creature transformed into something. A towering, humanoid figure with a massive, powerful build. She sat there in stunned silence, unable to move, as the world around her seemed to freeze. The night became eerily quiet. The usual sounds of the woods falling away until all that remained was the thundering of her own heartbeat. It was as if time had stopped, and the very air around her had turned cold. Finally, her instincts took over, and she began to drive forward, never once looking to the left or right, her eyes locked straight ahead. The fear was so intense that she couldn't speak, couldn't think. Until she was far enough away that the oppressive presence of the creature seemed to lift. On a solo hike through the Appalachian trails of Tennessee, a hiker found themselves surrounded by the quiet, serene beauty of the mountains. The solitude was peaceful at first, but as they ventured deeper into the wilderness, something strange happened. Out of nowhere, they heard a voice, clear as day, calling their name. It was a voice they knew well, unmistakably that of their father. The sound stopped them in their tracks. The problem was, their father had passed away 2 years ago. Confusion and fear gripped the hiker as they stood frozen, trying to make sense of what they had just heard. The voice was so familiar, so real, that for a moment, they wondered if they were losing their mind. As the day wore on, the unease didn't pass. Instead, the hiker began to feel increasingly ill. A massive headache set in, one that would last for the next 3 days, leaving them drained and disoriented. The encounter haunted the hiker long after they left the mountains, leaving them to wonder if they had truly heard their father's voice, or if something else, something unexplainable, had reached out to them from the shadows of the Appalachian wilderness. One of the notable 411 missing cases that happened in the Appalachia was of Dennis Martin. a 6-year-old boy who disappeared in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in 1969. Despite extensive search efforts, no trace of him was ever found. Dennis Martin disappeared in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on June 14, 1969. His case is one of the most well-known and baffling within the missing 411 phenomenon. Dennis Martin was on a family camping trip in the Spencefield area of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This area is known for its beautiful meadows and dense forests, popular with hikers and campers. Dennis was playing with his brother and other children from another family. The children decided to play a game of hide and seek and planned to surprise the adults by sneaking up on them. Dennis chose a spot to hide in the bushes. When the children regrouped, Dennis was not among them. His father, William Martin, immediately began searching the area, calling out for Dennis, but there was no response. Within minutes, the search expanded to a more frantic effort involving other campers. As soon as Dennis was reported missing, park rangers were notified, and an extensive search began. The search effort quickly escalated into one of the largest manhunts in the park's history. Over the next few weeks, more than 1,400 searchers participated, including park rangers, National Guard troops, and volunteers. Bloodhounds, helicopters, and specialized search teams scoured the area. Despite these efforts, no significant clues were found. The search was hampered by heavy rain and mist, which likely washed away any tracks or scent trails that could have been followed by search dogs. The dense foliage and rugged terrain also made it difficult for searchers to cover ground efficiently. The Martin family was devastated by the loss. William and Mary Martin, Dennis's parents, never gave up hope and continued to search for their son for years after the official search was called off. In the summer of 2019, a camp counselor found themselves deep in the heart of North Carolina's Smoky Mountains. The overnight campout, a tradition that took them deeper into the woods, had always been a highlight. The remote location, far from any roads or civilization, was the perfect setting for a night under the stars. But at around 4 a.m., when the kids were fast asleep, something unusual began to happen. Off in the distance, the counselor heard a sound, an eerie, old siren-like howl that seemed to rise and fall, echoing through the forest. At first, it was faint, almost unnoticeable. But over the next 45 minutes, it grew louder, slowly approaching and then receding, only to return with more intensity. There was no clear explanation for what it could be. The area was so remote that the idea of a vehicle or machinery producing such a sound seemed impossible. The noise had an almost unnatural quality to it, like a speaker moving through the woods, yet that was equally hard to believe. Eventually, the sound stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. The experience stayed with the counselor long after that night. In the years that followed, they stumbled upon stories and theories about Bigfoot, a creature said to inhabit the very woods they had camped in. The descriptions of strange sounds associated with Bigfoot sightings, howls, screams, and other inexplicable noises, struck a chord. Could it have been Bigfoot? The counselor wasn't sure, but the mystery of that night in the Smoky Mountains lingered.